name is Kunal Sinha, and I'm delighted to introduce this lovely panel to you. Dr. Anil Pillai is a globally renowned behavioral strategy expert with 3 decades of experience across diverse industries and geographies. He has collaborated with Fortune 500, Fortune 100, and Fortune 500 brands to drive impactful growth, and he is a contributing author to the book Consumer Happiness. Joe Frankie is the president and founder of JF3 Associates, and he epitomizes leadership and mentorship. A West Point graduate and combat veteran, Joe's understanding of the power of teamwork is unparalleled. His accolades include being the award-winning co-author of LinkedIn, the 5-minute drill for executive networking success. As CEO and founder of the Wisdom Collective Companies and host of Executive Diaries, Erica Hansen strips away the boardroom gloss to reveal what executives are really dealing with behind the scenes: burnout, broken systems, and the pressure to scale in the face of uncertainty. I look forward to her bringing a unique blend of candor and expertise to this conversation. With over 2 decades of cross-industry experience, Anand Govindarajan has turned his passion for sustainability into action, leading Green Earth Systems to become a trusted name in environmental engineering and water treatment solutions. We look forward to his inspiring insights on how sustainability and innovation can go hand in hand to create a better tomorrow. With a career spanning over 28 years, Charu Sultani has emerged as a distinguished leader in travel, hospitality, and business consulting industries. Her resilience during challenging times, particularly during the global pandemic, demonstrated her ability to innovate and adapt. Her numerous accolades include the prestigious Womenpreneur Award, and her role as the president of the Womenpreneur chapter in Hong Kong highlight her dedication to empowering women entrepreneurs. Kiera Werberg is an experienced executive and technology leader with a background that bridges business strategy and enterprise IT. She's the CEO of Iniox, a technology consulting company where she actively manages the business development and operations. Her work is guided by a practical approach, aligning technology with organizational needs to create long-term value and resilience in an international environment. Now, we are all living in times of flux, the VUCA world, as everyone calls it, and the ground beneath us is shifting all the time. So the first question I'm going to pose to the panel, one by one, is how do you recognize when your strategy is not working? What are some of those red flags that trigger changes in your business strategy? And I'll start with Erica first.
So I have a history of reorganizing companies, starting with accounting and working through all of the operations that are adjacent, which is basically everything. And through that, you find that the strategies aren't working because you're seeing operational holes in your programs, right? You're having trouble getting information. Things aren't working the way you thought it was. There's things that are happening along the way that are causing strife throughout the organization. You're blowing your core stability. So, for instance, I had a company I was working with. They were going through an acquisition frenzy. It was a private company, but they were buying mom and pops that were in adjacent health areas. They were buying 8 or 9 of these mom and pops a month, and they'd been doing it for 8 months. It was brutal on their implementation team. Well, what was happening is they ended up having to go outside and hire additional talent to help them for that in-between time. We called it, the in-between when they were fully implemented and when they were acquired. So we had 20, 30 programs at any one point in time that wasn't fully integrated yet because their integration team was having trouble. They were struggling because there was so much stuff to do. That's a perfect example of your strategy is overriding your capabilities, right? We had 20 different acquisitions when they were acquiring 8 or 9 a month. That means there's 3 or 4 months of roadway that they weren't able to implement in time. So this is a perfect example of the strategy's not working. It's putting a lot of stress on your organization. Maybe we need to look at that pipeline for the acquisitions and decide how we're going to do it and what can be adjusted or changed so that our organization doesn't start falling apart on the backside. Perfect example.
Thank you. Kiera, one of the things that you said earlier in our when we were getting to know each other, that your entire experience has been falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up. How do you make sure that you don't fall again? How are you preparing for that?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, I started the company relatively young. It was inevitable for me to not be able to rely purely on my experiences based off age and experience in my work. A lot of my, you know, changes in how I was going to lead and proceed were going to be reliant on pivoting, right? So, kind of realizing, okay, this is not working. I'm falling down. Let's try something else, and then learning from that experience and going on and on. I think something that I pay attention to now a lot is whether the investment of my efforts weigh up against the return. If I start to have to give an exponentially amount of effort towards a certain initiative or project or whatever internally, but the return is marginal, whether that be in monetary value, whether that be in team effort, if I start having to throw massive teams at it but not getting an exponential amount of return back, I realize something's not right with the strategy. Something's not matching up here, something's not aligning, and I review that from that point of view. So that's one of the points I've seen as well. A good example, for instance, where I saw a symptom of that is where I think we discussed this earlier as well. I said I started to feel a bit like the yes man from Jim Carrey. I started to say yes to everything that would come my way, and I realized one of the strengths that you should also own as a leader is knowing when to say no.
Absolutely.
When it's to clients, whether it's to your internal team, whether it's to your board or your investors, you need to understand when it's the right time to say no and when it's the right time to say yes in order to be able to create that real value and in order to create that sustainable value.
Fantastic. Joe, I move to you now, and you also talked about, you have a very interesting experience both in the private sector and the public sector. What we really need to know is from your military background and your work with the public sector, what has been your experience? What kind of red flags have you come across?
Well, in the public or military sector, you go back to the nursery rhyme that, when Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, can everybody put Humpty Dumpty back together again? And so what you find is in certain cases, you'll have what I call force majeure events. Okay. So we're all used to planning for contingencies. We plan and think through what are we going to do if this happens or that happens. Well, what happens when something completely out of your brain housing group perspective occurs? What are you going to do? So I call those force majeure events. And so one time we were working on a $7 billion project in China. And so we were at the closing table with term sheets, banks, the Chinese water districts, and all that kind of stuff. And then we had a financial event that, rocked the international world a while. And so in the space of 15 minutes, some deal you worked on for 3 years just didn't make financial sense anymore. And so you just have to be able to, dust yourself off and figure out what you're going to do. In this particular case, we tried to breathe life into the project for about 6 months and then just decided that all parties just needed to move on and let the system clear up itself. From the public sector, in the military, you're going to have events occur that you didn't plan on. So you're always in the, now this has happened, how do we pivot from this? And what's going to be the least cost and resources, based on certain courses of action.
Fantastic. So, Anil, from a behavior perspective, what kind of changes in whether it's in consumer behavior or leadership behavior that you see that really comes up as a red flag which you need to act on strategically?
So, pivoting is a very natural phenomenon. So the belief that one needs to pivot is something that is alien to human behavior is not true. For example, let me ask a question: why do gamblers lose money? Anybody in the audience? Why does a gambler keep losing money? You know, the house always wins, right? That's the basis on which casinos make their money. So why do gamblers continuously lose money? And where does that hope come from? The hope comes from the fact that you don't need to pivot, right? So there is a dissonance between the story you tell yourself and what data tells you. And that's really the reason why human beings and brands and companies do not pivot. Because there is a dissonance between the story that you're telling yourself, oh, this is a good situation to be in, we've got the best product, the best leadership, and therefore I do not need to pivot. Kodak is a great example, right? Nokia is a great example. You thought you did not need to pivot because you had the best engineered product in the market, and that was the internal story you were telling yourself. But the data from the market, the consumers were telling a completely different story. So when there's a huge mismatch between or dissonance between what you tell yourself and what the market tells you, that's the most dangerous moment, because you are then going to what we in behavior science call the sunk cost fallacy. You're just going to keep investing in a bad idea and you keep keep doing that. And like a gambler, I'll win the next round. I'll win the next round. And before you know it, they throw you out in the street and you're like, without a penny in your pocket. That to me is a huge red flag.
Thank you for that, for keeping an eye out for those risks and you know, not reinforcing the same bad behavior, I think, which is the trap that a lot of us fall into. Yeah. Charul, I mean, you had a fantastic experience. I think we all can learn from pivoting your business in the worst of times and the most turbulent of times. Can you share your perspective?
Yes. So I was in Hong Kong during COVID time, and it was one of the destination which was actually totally under the restrictions. Nothing was moving, and I'm into the travel and the events business, and that was a worst time I could say for us, and I have to pivot completely because I was into the conferences, hotel accommodations, and everything. How did I start? I started with local business. Something which is worst to touch, I touched that area, which is a quarantine area. From there, I went into uh, local events. From local events, then I noticed that my clients were even traveling from Hong Kong via Dubai to any destinations. That is where I got that this is another hub which I should consider moving or starting or expanding my business. That is where I expanded my business to Dubai. So red flags have been there for me from 2020, and I have pivoted a lot where every time there is a highlight that this is changing. So I have kept the note of what is happening in the market. I've closely kept eye on how my staff is behaving, how they are reacting to something. Are they, are they able to reach out to, sometimes there's a lot of work and there is, they are not able to operation and all. So pivot is something that we keep on doing. Without pivot, I couldn't move and I couldn't be here. And so I pivot every week. Wherever I feel that my clients are not confident with me, I pivot there. My staff is not pivot with me, I pivot there. So every time you should pivot. I think every week. That is very, very important.
That speaks a lot towards agility. But one of the big lessons I think we've all learned as people running businesses, working in organizations, is how black swan events like COVID have given us a certain roadmap, if you will, to handle more such tumultuous events and in business, in geopolitics, and making us better prepared. Uh, what has been your experience, Anand? Because again, the area that you're in, which is environmental management, there are massive crises happening across the world right now, and particularly from your experience in India, where solutions are becoming more important. What has been your learning from that?
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone. Uh, Initially, everyone start business with some passion and some goal plan. In 1999, when we started, we doesn't have much idea about management and other things and all. So what happened? No, you in India, most of the places people used to say, like, if you run a business for 5 years, there won't be any issue, then it will automatically run. This is the way people used to tell me, but it's not the real fact. Because initially we started with filtration plants for ferrous content, iron removal, and that time there is no solution for it in India. Some companies, big companies, have tried with like online filtration. It didn't work well, so we have invented with an easier solution, and it was going well. The problem we face, like what the others also sharing, a lot of people start copying it. We don't know about the patent and other things, so they started copying, and a lot of competitors rise. So we have to pivot and we have to change our course of direction. We added a lot of products, and in as Sir told, about India. So think about 25 years back about wastewater. So here and there you can see one or two plants if you go to some hotels like this, or big industry. Otherwise, no one knows about wastewater treatment. Normally, they do it with septic tanks and other things like that. So we tried a lot of new products in an economical way, and even we competed with big companies. We have put one third cost. We have installed effluent treatment plants for automobile industries. That time, no one believed us, but as everyone explaining that we have to keep on changing and finding new ways, that only it helps a business. And the main thing here is how we can be a different unique person when we compare to the competitors, so that we have to keep on work on that and see the warning signals wherever it's possible, and where all the places we have to correct it, so that we find some of the areas, like what I can say, like the employees won't accept what we try to implement, new product or technology or any implementations. That also shows in the behavior, and the profit falls and sales drop. Everything, it's a warning signal, and we can see a lot of red flags. So we have to change according to that. And one thing I have want to mention here, like we were focusing on one major client base. That base, then they slowly drifted from us because they have seen some competitors giving a competitive price. They don't value the product quality service. Then we found that, and we earlier we picked up, and we start migrating to the another expansion in our customer base in different areas. So it helped us to survive. So that is the thing I want to mention here.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a good introduction to the next question, which is really about early warning signals, right? As we as we gain experience, as we learn from previous incidents or previous strategies, we need to have the ability increasingly to spot those early warning signals. So, Joe, I mean, in your experience, both as a military person, again, you are always looking out for those early warning signals, and you have systems in place. But how does that work in business for you?
Well, the structure the military uses is whatever the current structure is on different things. So usually two standard deviations around the mean, if you look at something, is everything happening on how we planned it to happen, or are we getting an outlier from somewhere else? And then when the outlier comes, then what's the analysis? What are the courses of action to get it back, in line? In the private sector, what I've found is um, a lot of the things is when you have a strategic incident, when you're trying to put a deal together and you have, say, four parties coming together, you've spent a year in this, you've done that, and all of a sudden that party doesn't come to the meetings anymore. So that's kind of a red flag. And, the rest of us have to determine, okay, what can we do to get them back to the meeting? What can we get them to do? Or what's our next 2 or 3 courses of action that we're going to do?
Thank you. Kiera, I mean, your company works across geographies, and therefore, how do you, from, if it's another geography, it's another market, how do you spot a red flag, or what kind of early warning systems would you have?
I don't think there's necessarily something that I would say is different between regions. I will say that it is indeed required to be vigilant when you're working across regions, because, and actually there is one factor that I think is always very important to keep in mind, is ensuring that your team stays aligned and has still the same vision on what that strategy is. And I think if you're working at a global scale, you need to ensure that this is still the same vision at a leadership level, because it both then trickles down to the team. And if you don't ensure that you all have that same, let's say, vision, and that can be that you say, okay, our vision for APAC is going to be slightly different than our vision for Europe, but you do then still need to be aligned that that is how it's going to be executed, and that's the vision that you're going to have. In cases where that's not the case, and I have seen it not necessarily with us, but also with other companies that I've worked with in the past, I've seen that can cause a lot of confusion, a lot of stress on the organization, a lot of stress with the team, because they're getting mixed signals, right, from about where you're moving towards, what the direction is.
Mixed signals can be confusing, aren't they?
Exactly. Another thing that I tend to kind of see, and this is something that I don't think is necessarily, again, region specific, but what for me is a big red flag is when I start to notice that execution starts to become harder and not easier. When I start to notice that we are delivering in a way that is still remaining quite chaotic, I realize that something's not right with the strategy. I mean, our strategy is supposed to cause or enable a more seamless and frictionless execution. And if I'm realizing, hey, this is not working out, then for me, that is a big red flag from, okay, we need to adjust, we need to adapt and see what is causing these frictions within the team to not be able to execute on what we're delivering. I mean, we're a technology services company, right? So for us, that's a very key component to be able to make sure that we deliver.
Thank you for that. Erica, you advise leaders a lot. So what, in your advice to leaders, how do you prepare them to identify these early warning signals?
So a lot of restatement of what these guys have already said. You'll see organizational fatigue. You know it when you see it, right? Things are taking a lot longer to get done than you'd want them to. There's usually a mismatch between effort and payoff. There's usually a confusion somewhere between, like, within your team or within cross-functional teams that are dependent on each other. Not everybody may be swimming in the same direction. And it could be because of communication, but it could be the direction that you're going. So you always have to go back to what's the root of these three things happening. And then the other thing that is a really good signal, and you may be way down the line, is emotions. When the emotions start running high, your team is probably going to the edge, right? And it's pushing them a little bit further than you probably want to. You need to do several different things. Look at, do we need to pivot, or do we need to take a pressure valve break? Like when we got up after lunch. So those are all really good signs that when the strategy's not working or a project is extremely stressful and taxing the organization, those are the probably the 4 major warning signs that something is going on, and no matter what, you need to address it, right? It may be that your strategy's not working right, and maybe you need a pivot, or it may just be you got to give the teams like a depressure, right? And sometimes it's not a strategy pivot that needs to happen. Sometimes you just need to like depressurize everything and then get everybody back into their wheelhouse, right? And so, but you have to stop no matter what, because those are all warning signs and they don't get better by themselves, right? You have to make some sort of adjustment, whether it's just okay, let's take a minute and regroup, or hey, let's really look at what's happening. But those are the warning signs that say stop and let's really understand what's happening.
Thank you for that. So, as leaders pivot, I mean, one of the key things that determines what strategy you should follow next is, I believe, confidence. You may not always have all the data that you need, and that's what defines great leadership, confidence. So, again, from your examples, and I'll start with Anil, is that can you give an example of a pivot that you've encountered, and what gave you the confidence to make that pivot, or to advise someone to make that pivot?
So just before that, if I may, there's a point that just struck me. There are a lot of people in this room who are leaders. And this actually links to the story that I'm going to tell you. Uh, when companies pivot, they usually pivot on the basis of what the leadership decides that we must pivot. And leaders, like all human beings, also fall prey to common biases or heuristics. So there is something called the availability heuristic. So an airline accident has happened, you start fearing flying on that week. And this is this. So everything that stands out in the news or stands out as big data is something that you sort of give your attention to most at any given point of time. And basis that, I have seen organizations, leaders actually saying, we must pivot because oil prices are going to go high, or there is a war in Ukraine, or something dramatic is going to happen. And then you pivot, and then you realize that it's been an expensive mistake, and then you try and retract because your team does not believe in the pivot. So as leaders, one must always be aware, are you pivoting on the basis of data, or like Joe just mentioned, are you looking at outliers and you're pivoting on the basis of outliers? So because pivoting can be an extremely expensive exercise if you just keep pivoting on the basis of some unnamed fear that you're giving yourself into. Uh, when it comes to personal life and comes to, I've pivoted every decade as a business. I started out as in manufacturing. I pivoted, went into technology, pivoted, into consulting, pivoted. So, but why does that pivot happen, which is different from an organizational pivot? And that one must realize. Personal pivots are on the basis of when you say, I'm done and this is no longer exciting me enough, and I need to now go and do something that fulfills myself. Organizations do not have the luxury. So pivoting and this is something we tend to kind of misunderstand. We conflate personal, emotional pivoting moments and business pivoting moments. They're completely different, and one must learn how to separate them. That's really my take on that.
I mean, that's an important distinction to make, which leaders should understand and implement in their strategies. Charu, I mean, what has been your experience in terms of having the confidence to make that pivot, and the basis, where does that confidence come from?
So, obviously, without failure, nothing has happened. All of us have failed to pivot. So the confidence have come every time I've failed, I pivot. So I've looked into every small thing which has happened in my life. Like suppose I give you an example, last year, I suddenly start to feel that my mice business was falling down. And then I realized, why was it falling down? I start talking to my clients, I start talking to staff, I start looking into every small thing in a detailing. That's where I understood that there was a mistake from our side. Clients wanted my attention on it. So every detailed, I looked into it. So again, my emotions was involved, how we said we shouldn't mix the emotions. My emotions was involved there. And also the communication really helped to pivot again and again on this.
Yeah. communicating, you know,
Yeah,
with
communication
everyone's
is the key. Communication and emotions do play a very, very special role in my life. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us of that. Anand, what's been your perspective in terms of just confidence and the basis of that confidence?
Yeah. About pivoting or
Yeah, about making the strategic pivots, right?
yeah. See, we faced in our company like skilled people, short of skilled people. So we used to get into a lot of new clients and all. So we are unable to match the skilled laborers to manage the projects. So we sensed it early, and we start from developing our existing the people who are in lower levels also. Like we have set of different type of employees like operators, technical service assistants like that. We even take people from operators level, and even though they doesn't have uh, proper qualification about, then they are knowledgeable. They practically they know how to run a plant or something like that. So we trained them, and we started using rather taking resource from outside. That thought application helped us a lot and give us a lot of confidence to the employees also.
Right.
Then the retaining level is very high in our company. Some people are working for more than 20 years in our company. Being a very MSME company, people staying for longer periods, really it's a miracle. That only I feel about see.
Yeah, I mean that's such a good management lesson, isn't it? Which is, you know, when you build loyalty, then you have the greater ability to take the company, you know, take everyone in the company along and use their expertise to help you make those pivots, to make those changes, right? Uh, I'm going to just open up I want to open up the floor and ask you, I mean, do you have any questions or do you have any experiences to share at this point in time? I'm sure, you know, as business leaders, yeah. Can someone hand him the microphone, please, if you could just identify yourself?
Or you can just shout. Oh, good, good, very good.
Can I just take
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So you mentioned growth, profitability, and cash flow. I would not put them all three in the same breath because cash flow is oxygen. If you don't have cash flow, you forget pivoting. You won't survive to pivot, right? So cash flow is an absolute necessity and it's an operational necessity. Growth and you said profitability, right? Yeah. So if you look at the context of the discussion that we are having today, uh, like I said, cash flow does not even enter the equation of pivoting because if you're not making cash in a business, you may as well really look at it hard. It's not a pivot; it's a reinvention. Growth and profitability most certainly play a role in your decision to pivot. So the question here, the short answer is, if you're uncomfortable doing a pivot, that means you're not pivoting. Okay, that's one takeaway. So the takeaway for you is this, that if you're uncomfortable doing a pivot, you're not pivoting.
Can I just add? Can I just add to him?
I'm sorry, say it again. Yeah. No, it's not. It depends on the industry, right? I mean, if in aerospace, Boeing, for example, won't grow at 15%. Yeah, or in economy, for example, if you're in the EU, you know, I bet that where your GDP average is around 2.5% on a good year. Growth of a 15% in a company means you must be doing phenomenally something very different, you know. So 15% is not a benchmark, right? And if you go to Pablo Escobar, you'll say 15% is nothing. I grow by 300% every year. So it just depends on what business you're in.
just to this. So I will also put the growth and profitability at one space, when we have to pivot. When it comes to cash flow, I would say I will look into the organic growth and inorganic growth. If we are not organic way growing with the cash flow, we should look at the different ways. That's the way we should be looking into pivot for in terms of the cash flow.
That's a very unique Indian phenomenon, where large companies pay smaller companies much later than normal, thereby using that cash to run businesses. That is really a structural problem. That's really not a pivot problem. That's a structural problem which is being addressed in many ways right now. If you know how things are changing, but that's really not a business challenge. That's a structural challenge.
Joe, you had something to add to that.
No, I think Anil handled that very well.
Any other questions? We have a couple of minutes. I want to make sure that we make the best use of the time.
Who does not want to pivot? Is there anybody in the room who thinks that one must not pivot at all? Please raise your hand. I'd love to have that conversation. Really? No, everybody thinks that we must pivot.
I think everyone, given the times, everyone thinks that they've had to pivot.
There's an interesting thing though. The time to pivot has come down dramatically short.
Absolutely, it has. It has. We are. I mean, to use a loose word, everyone's become very agile and in today's world, right?
So that's interesting because I think when you say agile, we're talking about tactical. And so you have an operational level and you have a strategic level. And so the question is, when do you want to strategically pivot? And it might be in reaction to something that's happening tactical that has affected the operational thing. And you end up having to make a decision because the current course of action is not leading anywhere. And so one of the things that one of the earlier speakers talked about was listening. He was on the panel and he talked about listen. You got two ears and one mouth, listen. And so what I find is when I say to my subordinate leaders, listen, and I said, go look at the people's face because 80% of communication is nonverbal. So get out of your chair, walk down there, talk to people, and usually they have a lot that they can help you with that you haven't even seen or even thought about.
It's called management by walking around. I recommend it highly, but be prepared for what you find if you start asking questions. Make sure you have the time. And I would like to piggyback on that too and say, before you can even think about, the pivots and examining, your 4 pillars are cash, which leads to teams, because if you don't have the cash, you can't pay the teams. Then you're looking at profitability and growth. If you're not profitable, you're not going to be able to grow the same amount. You need the cash and the teams to do it. So there's 4 pillars you should be concentrating on, right? And I have one question. So I want everybody in this room, if you've done some sort of pivot, whether it's small or very large, this in 2025, I want you to raise your hand. Right? Now, for those of you that did not raise your hand, are you even considering it? You haven't done it yet, but let's see if you've considered it. Is anybody considering it right now?
We've got 2 weeks to pivot.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, are you considering doing a pivot like in the next 6 months? It's something you've been considering, right? What's stopping you right now? Are you still data gathering or, yeah, you're think fast. Don't let it move fast past you.
Great.
On that note, thank you for adding fresh perspectives. Really grateful to the panel. Glad you brought up a question. I'm sure everyone got questions. I think our LinkedIn profiles are there on the conference agenda. Please feel free to reach out to anyone on the panel. Thank you.